I'm Maureen Bellatori, and this is Spilled Salt, a podcast on the thrills and spills from the food, beverage, and agriculture industries. With the exception of today. So today, my guest is Bob Bailey. Bob is the founder and managing partner at Truth Collective, who is an agency that helps brands find their braver side. Bob is not focused in food, beverage, or agriculture, but he, as an agency owner, is a really innovative thinker and a great friend, and he has a lot of experience and knowledge in bringing AI to the table and how AI is working with brands, and brands are certainly a cornerstone of a lot of what we talk about on the podcast. And so you'll enjoy this conversation in what we touch on in terms of AI topics, but to go back and talk a little bit more about what Truth Collective is and who Bob is in relation to that. Bob's job at Truth is to create ideal conditions for trusting creative relationships. We talk a lot about that on the episode today. Truth focuses on growing their clients' businesses in two ways, with brand strategy, brand identity, and brand activation. Their client NPS, so that's Net Promoter Score, is a 93, and their employer Net Promoter Score is an 82, which are both considered world-class numbers. Speaking of world-class, Truth is leveraging AI in such a novel way with what they're calling AI Bravestorm. It's a premium workshop experience that supercharges your marketing with the power of AI. I love how Bob talks about that and really boils it down to the concept of democratizing premium creativity. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, Bob, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, Maureen. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Yes. I'm very excited. I'll start by sharing with everybody. Bob and I are old friends, and so really excited to be able to pull out some of his expertise to share with all of you. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
I love to start back in the beginning. And so you've been in account management your entire career, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about what interested you in that early on. Did you always know that that was what you wanted to do, or was it sort of just something that you fell into?
Yeah, interesting question. I haven't thought about that in a really long time. You know, when I think about how I got into the business, like, I don't think there's a lot of like high school kids running around saying, I want to be an account executive,
Exactly. Yes.
which isn't really a thing. But there were a couple of areas that really interested me. First was actually being an attorney. So I love
That's
the
what you
idea.
thought you wanted to do?
I did. I thought I wanted to be an attorney. I was always super interested in that. And, the idea of, these sort of like, the TV moments where you're, high stakes situations, you're persuading people, you're doing those kinds of things, which was really interesting to me. But the idea of, going to school for a lot longer did not interest me.
So you were not a school kid. You were not a kid that like enjoyed school?
No, when I was in high school, my academic gifts were really not apparent to people. But I did, when I was a senior in high school, we took these mini courses. We took 4 mini courses that you got to pick for English class. And I was always a good writer. I always really enjoyed writing, and it sort of like saved me, and it covered a lot of soft spots in certain ways. And I took an advertising course, and I fell in love with that and the idea of, brands and helping them stand apart and finding really interesting ways to do that. And then I also took a debate course. And so it taught me how to think through different situations, structure a point of view, and express that point of view, in front of others, and to try to do that in a persuasive manner. And I sort of fused those two things together. I didn't know I was doing that at the time, but I sort of put those two things together. I love this, I love that, and that's kind of what like the agency world is all about,
Yeah.
And, I wasn't a creative, I wasn't a writer or a designer. I was very business focused, and so the account side was really where it was at for me if I wanted to get into that business, straight out of school, especially. So
Mm-hmm.
what I did in 1993, began at a direct marketing agency called Catalyst, and quickly learned the importance of accountability in your marketing, because if you've done a good job or if you have not done a good job in
Mm.
that space. And then moved into more of a brand and integrated sort of a model, because I wanted to expand my knowledge that way. And all that time, I began as an account coordinator in my first job, which I don't even think that's a job anymore. But I was in a storage room, and you do whatever, and then
Yeah.
sort of as you go, rose to sort of director of client service levels, COO, president, and then it was just time to see if I could do it on my own.
Mm-hmm. So going back to Catalyst. So first of all, I want to just reflect back to you what I'm hearing. You mentioned that writing in those very early days sort of saved you from some soft spots where you were not as strong on the academic side, but
Yes.
also said that your interest on the attorney side of things was like persuasion and debate and advertising. You love the persuasion side of things. And those are
Yep.
all so connected, right? They're very different lanes, right? An attorney versus accounts and business management, really, and managing partner and the work that you're doing now, but they are connected in a lot of ways. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, just the idea of, as a business owner, how many various hats you have to wear, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to be nimble to kind of go from one lane to another. And sometimes you probably are wearing a hat that's very similar to an attorney in terms of reviewing documents and that sort of thing,
Yeah,
so yeah.
it's true.
So I'm curious about your time at Catalyst and like what sort of place that was, and maybe you don't even have to speak about them
Mm-hmm.
specifically, but just I spent 10 years in professional services before I went, started and grew Agency 29 to a full-time thing. And there is a lot about the culture that I very intentionally create at Agency 29 that is built on the things I really, really hated from previous roles and places.
Sure.
Right. And so I'm curious about, Catalyst and some of the other places that you worked before starting Truth, that how those shape what you do at Truth and how you work and how you grow the team and that sort of
Sure.
thing today.
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. I think I think we're ultimately, as leaders, like we're sort of the product of a lot of really good things and a lot of tough things, and then when we venture out and try to mold something, in our image, that's sort of subconsciously and sometimes consciously what we're doing is we're taking those bits that really work, and we're changing and tweaking some of the stuff that really didn't work for us. I would say that at Catalyst, right out of the gate, I was a 19th person hired there. So it was small, it was fast. It was really hard charging, really hardworking, really intense, which, in the first 6 months of a career with knowing nothing, like that's a hard place to be.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it really shapes you, and I think pulls some good stuff out. That was also a culture that was character really mattered. I watched the two owners a lot. I got to interact with them a lot because of our size, which was great. But I really paid attention to how they carried themselves in good situations and in hard situations, and how they responded to, mistakes and bad things. And I learned there that the greatest mistake is inaction, right? You can, as long as you're doing your level best, as long as you're operating within, the values of the company and the team first, then mistakes are going to happen. And in fact, as long as you're learning from those, then they can be a good thing. But the number one thing is, just act, move, keep going. And I think that's a hard thing for people a lot of times. I think people tend to wait for perfect situations or all the information before they will, form a decision and take a step. But business isn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that I've really tried hard to do at Truth is create that same culture where I value action. Our two of our values are energy and ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing that and you're telling the truth and you're being honest and you're taking care of your teams, that's fine. Nobody's getting in
Right.
trouble.
Yep.
And I think that's probably the most salient thing that I learned at a young age that really still sticks with me. And to try to create an environment where people can just be their best and be comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and feel safe enough to take those risks.
Yeah, I was just going to say that word safe because that's really ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is that people want to know that they're in a safe environment, and that means something different to a number of people, right? But this
Right.
idea of as long as you're aligned with our core values, you're not going to get in trouble. I literally had the same conversation with my kids the other day when we were talking about, who did something to knock something down, and no one would fess up to it. And I still don't know who did it, but I said, I don't care about the thing that got knocked down. I care about the fact that I know that it was one of you two, and nobody's telling me what happened, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
You're not going to get in trouble, but it's about the truth. And so perhaps that goes well into, not to want to skip a few, because I do want to talk about the transition and how Truth was created, but tell
Sure.
us about the name a little bit. Where did that come from? And maybe in that you can also talk about your partners and kind of why you guys
Sure.
wanted to team up.
Yeah. So the truth is a really, it's a really interesting idea. Before we started it, uh, I'm going to say we started in 2013. Around 2010 or so, you started to see a lot of data of consumers distrusting brands, right?
Mm,
And it became a real topic of conversation, and it also was starting to translate into trust diminishing between clients and agencies, on both sides. And so, believe it or not, like the question that started it was, hey, do you think an agency could thrive by telling the truth at every turn?
mm,
And it was simple but not easy, right? Like I love the simplicity of the idea still today. Um, but it became our sort of North Star. Like, let's just really simplify this thing. Like if you just, if you lean into your credibility and you're confident in what you do, and you place your clients first all the time, no matter what, then let that be the way. And it really does simplify things. There's really
hmm
no question about what to do or how to do it. And so that was sort of the impetus of the truth aspect. And collective was actually sort of, it's about a group of people who believe that, but then also our model was, we wanted to not build, a big agency, with, tons of headcount and things like that.
hmm
We wanted to be able to build flexible teams based on what the client needed. Sometimes a
mm,
client's going to need a brand strategy and a brand identity. That's a different team than, a client who needs a national TV spot, for example. And
right.
so the flexibility to bring best talent to that table was always really important to us. And that's Truth Collective. And I have two partners. Um, and one is John Roberts, who's a strategist, and Jeremy Schwartz, who's a creative. And we worked together at our former agency. And for a number of years, I think we've been working together now for probably 25 years or so.
hmm
13 at Truth, and the rest at our former agency. And we we had done a lot to, support that agency, support the team, support those clients. And it got to a point where, the thing that we had not done was see if we could build it for ourselves. And that was the impetus to take that leap. And it was important for us at the time too, is if you have, I think being a sole founder, like I really respect that about you. Like I would have a ton of questions for you about that. But for us, the type of work that we were doing, we sort of recognized that, if you have solid client leadership skills, if you have solid strategic skills and solid creative skills, sort of the three-legged stool thing, you can
Yeah.
get a lot done.
Yeah, totally.
People can get a ton done, and so that was important to us, and that actually is sort of how we shaped the business.
I personally, it's so interesting for you to say that about, me being a sole founder, because I've had other businesses where I was in partnership, and partnership is actually, in my mind, more difficult. Right. So I know exactly what you're talking about with that idea of a three-legged stool and the strength of you all, kind of in it together. But it's so hard to find people who have shared values, right? Same mindset, looking to do the same thing. And this much time later, right? So you said 13 years later, you're still in this, and nobody changed their mind and said, you know what, this isn't for me, or, you came to an impasse or something like that. So I think that there's a lot to be said about the strength that the three of you have as people, right? And your character to kind of stick it out together. And I'm not saying that there haven't been hurdles along the way. I'm sure there have. It's life, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to kind of overcome that and stick it out together. And again, not to say, also, I've said this in other interviews as well, that even if that wasn't the case and somebody needed to go in another direction, that would be okay too, right? It's more about kind of sticking with, like, what is the right thing for all of the parties involved.
It is. And, I'm grateful for the fact that the three of us have aligned as well as we have for this period of time. I think it's unusual. But I think what it comes down to, it doesn't necessarily mean we agree on the same things all the time, because that wouldn't be real, right? But I think what it does do is it keeps us focused on the sort of bigger picture. And, consensus doesn't mean agreement all the time, right? And sometimes consensus is just about, like, okay, what's the best way to move forward for our team and for our clients? Even if Bob doesn't, would rather a different path be chosen. And I think it really comes down to, I think, how connected we are and how connected partners stay, because it's super easy to be really connected in the early days, in the first few years of things.
Yeah.
Because it's the three of you, then it's five of you, but it's super tight, in the early days. And I think it's really easy for partners to drift apart and to, I'm solely focused on the clients, I'm solely focused on this and that. And, that's when misalignment can come in. And we actually, during COVID, like the first couple of days of COVID in 2020, we decided that the three of us were going to meet. We're going to dedicate every Friday morning together. And, nobody was coming in the office, but the three of us were coming into the office and just working together and talking together and figuring out what to do. And that stayed. Like, we still do that every Friday morning. Is we call it the JBJ meeting. It's not John Bon Jovi, but it is Jeremy, John, and Bob. Jeremy, Bob, and John. We still do it every Friday, and it really, really, it's incredibly helpful to stay aligned and to know that you've got people that you can lean on, and sometimes you're picking them up, and it just
totally
works.
Yeah, I love that. Critically important. Um, you talked a little bit about this idea of, a flexible team, and that's where the concept of collective came in, and this,
Mhm.
search for truth, and like the pursuit of doing the right thing is kind of how I receive that in the, how you talk about it. And this idea of what we do and what we don't do. So you
Mm.
and I are both team niches, right? So, and you know what they say about that, riches in the niches. But talk about yours. So obviously ours
Sometimes.
is yeah, sometimes, hopefully in the long haul, right? Very, very
Yes,
long haul in some
the
cases.
long game.
Yes. But so ours being industry focused in food,
Mhm.
beverage, and agriculture, you went more services focused in brand identity and brand activation. Talk a little
Yep.
bit about that, because I remember you guys making that shift years ago, um, and it was really, I think it was really novel at the time, right? To be more services focused like that. So talk a little bit about, how did you find that? How did you
Yeah.
determine what made you want to do it?
Good question. We actually started that way. In the
Mm.
very beginning, like we started with a real, focus on the things that we were great at, and we got off the ground that way. As client relationships deepen, hey, can you help us with a website? Hey, can you help us do these things, right? And so, of course, you want to help them and you service them, and ultimately you start to build out, different offerings, different capabilities, things like that. And you can be good at a lot of things, you know,
Mhm.
but I think you can be like great and elite at a few things. And
Yes.
so um, a few years ago, I was probably like 4 years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but we said, listen, like we're not sector specialists. We didn't feel like that was the right approach for us, but we really wanted to simplify things. And we focused in on the zone that where we can provide elite services, and that's brand strategy and identity. And it's brand activation work. So translating that brand into um, a brave, distinctive campaign platform. And
Mhm.
even within the brand activation space, we tend to focus more on sort of like the upper funnel
Yeah,
aspect of the
right.
campaigns. I don't have a studio cranking out thousands of banner ads,
Right.
uh, things like that. And so
Mhm.
we really focus where we felt we could add the greatest value to our clients, and those were the two areas that we felt best about.
So, but there was a time, you mentioned that you started out with a brand focus, but there was a time where you made a shift to only do a certain type of work, right?
Um, well, if it doesn't fall into those two camps, I say no. I
Mhm.
don't try to fit things. I don't try to structure things. I don't try to. I'd rather just have like good people that I know that I think could do a good job for them and
Mhm.
help them that way. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, there's always been things that we have not done. Like we don't do media, we don't do PR, we never have.
Sure.
There's part of the collective is recognizing that there's really exceptional people that do this all day long.
Mhm.
There's people who have forgotten more about media than I will ever know. And so it's really about knowing where where your value is going to come from and where you need
Right.
to, augment that with somebody else's. I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, that it makes sense. And we could have a whole other conversation about like the importance of saying no, and what is right for you versus what isn't. And if we have time to circle back to that, we can go
Sure.
into it. But I want to shift over to your AI Bravestorm initiative and have you talk about that a little bit, especially on the tail end of this conversation where we're talking about elite and what you do well, and it being a cornerstone for truth of really staying in your lane. Why is AI now deserving to be part of that lane?
Boy, I think we experienced that like chat GPT moment a few years ago with everybody else. I mean, you remember it probably the first time
Yeah.
you touched it, and it was really different, and we were having a conversation about that, and sort of one of two points of view emerged, like, this is garbage, right?
Yeah.
This is nothing, like, this is crap. Or, boy, this could really change how the world works and how we
Hmm.
work. And we were immediately aligned on that path. Like, there was a lot of reservations and questions about it, but we really saw the opportunity of it all. And from that, we just sort of like went into this FAFO mode, FAFO, fuck around, figure it out mode.
Yes, I love it.
And that led to more curiosity, and that led us to create a training curriculum for all of our people. One of the benefits of being a small company is you can train everybody all at the same time.
Yeah.
And we created a training curriculum, did biweekly homework assignments that everybody was doing, and everybody learned and showed up and presented their work, which led to real breakthroughs in terms of like skill set and skill capacity building. And that turned into working a little bit differently internally. And actually, one of our people said, geez, why don't we work this way with clients?
Hmm.
Why don't we do this with, not just how we're doing things internally, but geez, could we apply this to client work situations? And we piloted it with a couple clients in Q4 of 2024, and the results were pretty good. We learned a lot, and we commercialized it really hard starting in Q1 of 25. And really what it does is it brings our clients directly into the creative process.
Hmm.
There's no
So
black.
yes, and I have a million questions for you that I'd love to get into about what does that exactly look like when you say you're bringing them in and they're, coming to the table. But prior to that, I want to just kind of talk about this concept of bringing it to the team, right? And you mentioned that you're training them, you're giving them homework, and you talked a little bit about the perception that you kind of welcomed this iteration of AI. Of course, it's been around for a long time, but we're talking
Sure.
about, what's been
Yeah.
happening over the last
Mass.
couple of
Yep.
years. That some agencies and even companies in general saw this happening and approached it with fear, right? Or perhaps received it with fear, right? That there was, is this going to replace my job? Is this going to, am I
Sure.
going to be obsolete? Am I going to have to, change everything about the way that I'm doing things? Instead, how, your team welcomed it with open arms, not only from the leadership, but from, it sounds like, every person. Why do you think that happened?
Boy. Well, I'll be really candid. There was varying degrees. All of those things, all
Mm-hmm.
those emotions that you just described, they lived among our team.
Sure.
They're regular people, and so I think what was really core to us is that we were always really clear that humans were going to be in the driver's seat of everything that we do, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to create, you know, load a picture and spit out 50 banners and see you
Right.
later. We're never going to do that. We wanted to harness it to help us be more elite at what we do and our
Mm-hmm.
skill, and to sharpen it from that perspective. And I think that the group training made it okay for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
you come every other week on Wednesdays, and you're presenting your homework to people, and you talk
Mm-hmm.
about what was, it could be a writing assignment, it could be a design assignment, whatever it was. And you talk about, like, you just take them through what you did and the decisions that you made and what was great about it and what sucked about it. And everybody learned from one another. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that environment made it okay.
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's okay to experiment and do these things. And it's really okay to talk about, what's great about it and what's less great about it. And I think we just created a really open, honest environment around it and let people we didn't force it on people, right?
Mm-hmm.
People tend to support what they help to create. And
Mm-hmm.
so they were absolutely part of our AI adoption and evolution and business pivot in that regard, because they had the right conditions to do it and to
Yeah.
experiment and to learn from.
Yep. Yeah. So again, I think it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of culture and making it a safe place for people, right?
Yeah,
That I'm sure contributed to people feeling comfortable that they could bring their whole selves to those meetings and say, this was really hard, or this was stupid, or I couldn't get past this, or this was
yeah,
frustrating, or whatever, right? That in some environments where your bosses are asking you to model, and test some new technology, at times there's an undertone of that, right? That's not actually, let's figure this out together. It's, you're going to figure this out
right,
and we're going to use it whether you like it or not.
correct.
That safety that you created for them allowed them to bring their whole selves to those meetings.
I think that's true. I'm glad you brought it up, because I hadn't thought this deeply about this until this
Mhm.
conversation. But there's, in situations where it is a top-down mandate, do these
Mhm.
things and use it starting now. There's also, like, the result of that is, like, there's a lot of internal sabotage that happens, you know,
Right.
because people don't necessarily want to do that, or they're afraid to do that, and so they don't do that. And
Mhm.
so many AI initiatives fail. I think close to 90% of AI initiatives are failing right now.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it is that it's,
Mhm.
sort of top down from people who don't fully understand it, um, and and just want things to happen sort of in that chain of command sort of way. Glad you brought
Mhm.
that up.
Yeah. Yeah, and so certainly, I mean, I have the same philosophy, right? When we're modeling something or testing something that we want to try with clients, we are our own guinea pigs first. How can we model this,
Yes,
in-house right before we bring it
absolutely.
outside? So, when did you know it was the right time to start modeling this with clients, and what exactly does that look like in terms of how you're engaging with clients in this transparent, AI as a thought partner, seat at the table kind of way?
So we have, rewind just for a second. When we chose those two specific lanes a few years ago, right?
Mhm.
One reason was, here's our real expertise. Like, these are our zones of genius. We're getting behind these things. The other thing we did at that time was we created real sort of protocols and standards around how we do each of those two things. We they're highly creative, but we created systems around them,
Sure.
and um, which also creates containment. We're big believers in containing tasks and binding them in time. And so
Mhm.
the traditional way of doing, a creative timeline would be, okay, we need 3 weeks to get to a strategy. We need 4 weeks to get to concepts, all that stuff, right?
Right.
And the reality is, like, clients, they need better than that. And so we've
Mhm.
always been about containment. And so we were always looking for ways. With focus comes, containment. And so we were already operating under that, sort of way of thinking. And then the AI was, okay, this lets us really contain things. It lets us bring the very best work and thinking to it in a very contained environment. And we felt like we could create real advantages for clients that way. Can we get clients in market faster? And how much so?
So
Those were,
when you say AI let you contain things, was it is that truly what you mean, or is it more so that AI allowed you to be faster, which is what the client wanted in terms of getting to that, rather than 3 weeks it was contained into
good point. So
less time?
I think what AI allowed us to do was to, um, it allowed us to continue in this containment place. But with AI, there's no, like, shortcuts of knowledge. It's still, because the way we were doing it, right? We were building in those protocols I was talking about,
Right.
all the brand frameworks, all the tools that we used
Mm.
all the time, right? the ways of working that were proven out over a decade. We trained the AI on those.
Right.
And
Right.
so you have real insight, you have IP, you have consistency there. And so that is what really helped accelerate
Makes sense.
and ensure a premium output,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's important. Anybody can go fast. Nobody remembers you're fast if it's not good, right?
Right.
And so I think what the AI let us do is embed all of those things that we have always done in a way that's very repeatable and very, very fast. And
Mm-hmm.
so that let us say, okay, I bet we can get clients into market 40% faster. I bet we can do it for less money. And I bet we can, do so and like grow the company in a way that doesn't require, headcount every single time you grow, because that's not a scalable
Mm-hmm.
business,
Right.
you know? So
Right.
those were the things that were coming together for us that said, oh, well, if we can figure this and we lean into our system and we operationalize it through this tool, that is what, creates sort of like that step function change. And that's what we wanted to
Mm-hmm.
try out.
So tell me a little bit about what the client perception of that has been. Right. So like what was when you said we're thinking of doing this, and even when after, kind of the first few, when it's now certainly a more established part of the way that you work, what's the concerns, or,
Mhm.
the positivity, or what's the sentiment that
Sure.
prospects or active clients have when you talk about AI Bravestorm and how you use AI as a thought partner?
Sure. So I think that um, the initial, it's a really different way of thinking, right? We always talk about the advantages of it first. And, we talk about we're, we're eliminating all gaps between clients and agencies because everybody understands that exists and everybody
Mm-hmm.
understands that that's a problem, right? We're pointing out the flaws of, that there is in the traditional creative workflow, there's waste, right? There just is. And
Sure.
so we talk about ways to mitigate that. And so there's business reasons to do it. And then when we can point to them and say, and we can do it in a way that ensures, premium creative output, the strategically grounded, they're very interested and they want to learn more about how that happens. There's a lot of companies who are still, they're under these sort of like AI mandates, but they're not really sure what to be doing about it.
Sure.
Sometimes partnering with somebody is a great way to get involved and to see how AI can improve the marketing communications function of company X. The other thing that we did, I think I did 70 in-depth interviews with people about this offering.
People who, what sort of folks
Uh,
did you talk to?
Clients, former clients, marketing leaders, people, search consultants, people who understand the business, who
Mm-hmm.
see lots and lots of agencies. And I took them through this thing and, talked about how it was going to work, what the outputs were going to be, got some pricing insights from people. And to a person, this is as novel idea as I've seen in a really long time. And it makes sense because it's using brand new technology, but it is doing it in a way that is strategically grounded and measured that they're also part of. And so
Right.
there's a high degree of control and sort of safety built into it from their standpoint too.
Yeah, which really is no different than what you had been doing prior to that, right? That it's all about the systems allow you to be able to have a conversation with a client about their strategy, their identity, and their output, knowing that when you get to the end of that you're in alignment is thanks to the processes that you follow along the way. And so
Yes.
really, when you think of it that way, it's no different, but it's also wildly different at the same time.
No, you're right. And in some of those, I think you're hitting on something that's really important because everybody talks about like AI and it's like, oh, it's going to you can automate all your stuff, right? There's a whole lot of like messy, unsexy work that has to happen in order
Right.
to do that. Like picking a lane and creating a structure and a system and proving it out and all those things. And what it did was it allowed us to do that, but then also just bring our clients directly into it. Like that is, I think, the single biggest differentiator of it. Yes, we're using AI in a really smart, structured way, but our clients are part of the creative process. And like that is a huge unlock. I didn't see that piece of it coming. Like the idea of co-creating with clients where we're leveraging all the strengths of Truth Collective and we're leveraging all the strengths of those brand leaders at the same time with this tool is an incredible unlock. You cover so much ground quickly. You make smart decisions. You're creating alignment among your team. You know, alignment among client teams is really hard to come by sometimes. And this process does that. And also the client trust happens really, really fast because they're part of it and they see it and they understand it now. And, you know, old way of working, it might take 6 months to, to really have a good trusting relationship with a client, just human nature, right? It's hours because they're in it because it's one team.
Yeah, and it's really such a, I know that your tagline, slogan, brand statement is brand ever braver. And that's such that's such an embodiment of that. Such a brave thing to do, to not be afraid to try something new and bring your team along and bring clients in for it and really change the way that it's always been done, right? Not only the way that you've always done it, but truly the way that it's always been done. You know, this is, it's like you mentioned, the feedback you got was novel. That's brave.
It is, you know, and I do think about that often. Like I'm not a creative, but I think that one of my obligations is to be brave as a business. And so you can you can hide from this thing or you can own it, you know, and really charge a path forward. And I think I feel more entrepreneurial today than I have in a long time. And it's because it's sort of like this new novel way of doing it. And we are doing it differently and trying to stay ahead of people. And we actually sort of, it changed our business strategy. Like our whole business strategy now is about democratizing premium creativity. We want to make what Truth does accessible to more and more and more people. And when that is your vision, then, you know, you're going to go into some really different places as a result of that. And I do think that's brave. And I also think it's fun. Like, I think it makes it worth doing.
Yeah. So I have a bumper sticker that I have like pinned to the wall behind me here that says, I got it at the Ben and Jerry's facility in Vermont, that it says, if it's not fun, why do it? Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think it's a good reminder for anyone, not just agency owners, not just people who are looking to embrace a new tool that could be scary and, you know, but how can you shift your mindset into how can I welcome this in and how can I make it fun along the way, I think is an admirable way to think about it.
That's
all right.
great.
So last question for you. And then we'll wrap up here. We'll talk just a little bit about the what's next. So, you know, with this sort of weird time that we're in with AI changing the landscape of how people work, no matter what industry you work in, what do you think is next in terms of the world of brands and marketing when it comes to AI?
So what it means for us, I'll just talk about sort of what we're doing about it right now, is we are in line with that business strategy of democratizing premium creativity. We have sort of I don't have like a vast service line, right? But I do have I call it the flywheel. So we have 3 offerings and 3 ways we can help clients. First is the AI Bravestorm strategy creative output. Second is after that process, after, you know, we've trained the tool on all of our IP and your brand's IP, we give clients access to that. So they can create on their own.
Wow.
And so that's sort of like a software subscription model that it basically
Okay.
truth on a desktop in a client's office. And so, anything that they're creating is going to be based on, the brand strategy and all the things to keep it really aligned.
That is very cool.
It's really something. We've had a number of clients beta testing it in 2025, and we're actually rolling it out in the next week or so. And so, truth interface, it's really cool. So it gives clients a lot of autonomy there. So they're not married to like big, expensive retainers.
And you're not bogged down with the little stuff that they can do on their own when you set them up for success. I love everything about it.
That's right. And so we're available for like office hours, because they're going to be creating a lot of stuff on their own. We'll do office hours and, guide and help with all those types of things, keeping the humans into it. And then also we're taking all the things that we've learned as a company, the training that we've done on ourselves and the new workflows and how we do it. And we're training internal creative teams. And so we have
training internal creative teams on the client side.
Correct.
Internal. Okay.
Yep. We are the exclusive AI training partner now for the In-House Agency Forum, which is a national group of internal creative teams, some really large companies, some small companies, but we are offering training programs either online, through cohorts, but we'll also do sort of like enterprise engagements and go on site for a 1 or 2 day thing. And so that's the flywheel, but we're helping people sort of wherever they are in that process. We want to help them realize the things that we've been able to do and short circuit it. They don't have to spend 2 years doing it like we did. So go ahead.
So this is not, I guess initially I was thinking that AI Bravestorm was like an initiative that was sort of riding alongside what you were already doing. It's central. You're all in. It's
central. We've doubled down. And if I can't do what you need with a Bravestorm, we're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the good thing about it is it can do a lot of things. We can Bravestorm a brand strategy. We can Bravestorm a campaign, a new name for a company. We haven't found an application that it won't work for, but if a client does not want to work in that way, it's not going to be a good fit for us.
Mm-hmm. So, love it.
Yeah. So those are some of the strategic choices that we've made around it, because we used last year to prove it out. Like, does it work? Does it generate the output, that we're looking for, that clients want? Are we saving them time getting into the market faster? And is it a good business deal for us? And so once we met those criteria, we said, no, this is it. This is how we work now. So
I love it.
A little brave.
Very brave. Very brave. I said that was the last question, but I lied. Tell me about a challenge. Like you said, 13 years you've been doing truth. What is, if you had to kind of bring it all down into one of the biggest challenges that you have faced in that tenure, what would you say?
Boy. Over the course of the biggest thing we faced?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something that transcended that whole time, or just like a moment, that was a transformative challenge.
Boy, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of them. I'll tell you, I think that I'm sure it's everybody's answer, but like COVID was, when you own a company, it really stopped you in your tracks. And like there was no strategy for that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You really had to rely on each other. Like you can trust about a half a dozen people in those moments. And I think that our ability, there's something I think about all the time, forming the formless, right? I think leaders have to do a good job of forming that which has no form. It's a Sun Tzu reference. But how do you take this really ambiguous situation and form it and mold it into something that is understandable and that is actionable. And I think that what that period did more than any other was help us sort of form the formless around these things. And I remember, gosh, I think the last real business day was March 13th, Friday, March 13th, 2020. And then starting Monday, was who knows what's going on here,
Right.
and clients stopping work and everybody just halting everything. And, that was one of those moments where you say, okay, I'm not sure, like, do we have a business anymore?
Right.
And we had to make damn sure that we did. And I think that, that challenge, it kind of makes other things seem reasonable.
Yeah. Remember that little global pandemic thing we went through? This is just a little, yes, that's a good point.
It really does. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the world has been really crazy in a lot of ways since then. It doesn't seem to really slow down and give anybody a breather. But I think that if you can go through something like that with your team, and do it the right way, do it together. Sort of comes back to that, I think a leader's got to make people feel safe, even when they don't feel safe themselves. I think that's the job. And I don't know. I guess that's what I would say. I don't know if it's an exciting answer or not.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a challenge question. It's not supposed to be exciting, but yeah, I think that's truthful.
We try.
Yeah. Bob, thank you so much for joining me. I loved this discussion. Thank you for your transparency and your innovation and your bravery, and what you guys are doing. I'm a big fan. Thanks, Mo. Love you too. Always love watching what you're doing and how you're doing it too. I think you guys do a great job, and I'm really proud of you and enjoy being your friend. Thanks. Thank you for listening to Spilled Salt. I'm your host, Maureen Ballatori. Spilled Salt is an Agency 29 production. Agency 29 is a brand-building firm for food, beverage, and agriculture brands. Learn more at agency29.com. For more information about the podcast, visit spilledsaltpodcast.com. Use that website to send me questions or recommendations for future guests. I always love hearing from you. Spilled Salt is available anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.